In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a stud jumps obby on Roblox, where your jump power gradually increases and your goal is to make it to the top of the tower. Let's get started. So here we are in Roblox Studio, and from this screen, we're going to select base plate. So click on the new in the top left corner and choose base plate here. Now this is going to give us a brand new place to work in. We can just dismiss these windows here, and we're going to make sure that we have the Explorer panel as well as the Properties panel enabled. So if you don't see these two panels, click on the View tab up here, and then make sure that Explorer and Properties are both selected. Now what we can do is click on the Home button, and we can insert a part from this Insert menu. So click on Part, and you can see that a brick has been added into the game. This is going to be the first platform for our stud jumps obby. So let's click on the Model tab. Let's make sure that the Move box under Snap to Grid is checked, and let's set it to 1 stud. Now we'll be able to constrain the movement of our part to this grid on our base plate, and it will help for when we scale the parts, which we're going to do now. So under the Model tab, if we click on the Scale tool, this will allow us to resize our block. So we can drag these handles to create a platform. Now that we've got this platform, we can give it some color. So in the Properties panel, if we just click on the Brick Color property, we can choose a color from this palette. So I'm going to choose Really Red. And now what I want to do is I want to add some text onto my brick to show how many studs the size of the part is. To do this, I'm going to click on the part to select it, and then in the Explorer panel, I'm going to click on this plus icon next to the selected part. And then I can search for an object, and I'm going to search for Surface GUI. Click on it, and now we have a Surface GUI which can display text or images on our part. So inside of this Surface GUI, just click on it, select the plus icon, and click on Text Label. You might have to search for it if you don't see it, so just type in Text Label, and then it should be inserted on one of the faces of your parts. So just move around until you can see it. If you can't see the text label, click on the Surface GUI, select Face, and just choose a different face from the list until you can see it. What we want to do is we want to select our text label, and we want it to fill the entire span of this part's face. So to do that, we can click on the text label in the Explorer panel, and then in the Properties window, underneath Size, we can set this to 1,0, 1,0, and that is going to fill the entire width and height of this face. Now, if we scroll down a little bit further, we can select Text Scaled and set that to be checked, and this will size the text to be as big as it can be within this part. So if we were to make this part bigger, you can see that the label increases in size. Now let's go back to our text label. We'll scroll up again in the Properties window, and let's set Background Transparency to be 1. Now I'm going to scroll down again, and if you like, you can edit the color of your part, of your text, sorry. Click on OK, and you can also change the font. I'm going to select Fredoka 1, and finally we can just give it some text. So I'm going to say 1 stud, because the size of this part is currently set to 1 stud on the y-axis. And if you want to check the size of your part, just select it in the Explorer, and in the Properties window, underneath where it says Size, you can see it's 16 studs on the x-axis, which goes across this way, 1 stud on the y-axis, which is the green arrow going up and down here, and 16 studs along the z-axis, which is the blue axis. Now, we've created our first platform, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that it stays fixed in position and it's not going to move with any physics operations or when someone jumps on the part, or we don't want anyone to push the part around either just by walking on it. So to do this, we can just make sure the part is still selected, and if we scroll down to the part section here in the Properties window, there is a property called Anchored, and that means that when checked, it will stay fixed and frozen in its position. So we'll just make sure that that is checked, and now we're good to carry on making more platforms. So our stud jump obby is going to be made up of lots of different platforms with varying heights, and the player will have to wait and build up their jump power gradually so that they're able to jump over the next platform. And obviously they're going to increase in size as they duplicate. So let's just take our spawn location and just move this out of the way, and we can select our platform here, and we can then right click and select duplicate, or you can press Ctrl D on your keyboard, which is what I'm going to do. If you're on a Mac, you can press Command and D. So I'm going to press Ctrl and D, and you can see in the Explorer panel that we now have a second part selected here. So it's just created a clone almost. It's done a copy and paste of this platform, and we now have a new platform that we can move over. So I'm going to select the move tool, and I'm going to drag this arrow to move it in this direction. Now, you might have to drag a different arrow depending on where you've placed your platforms. But once you've done that, all you need to do is then take the scale tool and drag it upwards for your next platform. So this could be 5 studs, for example. Let's just go and check our size property. So this is actually 10 studs. Okay, so 10 studs is what we've set it to. And I'm just going to drag this off the ground slightly. So the actual height that the player will have to jump from here up to here will be 10 studs. So we've created our first platform for 10 studs. Okay, now let's do another one. So let's just Control D or Command D to duplicate again. We're going to move it over, and then we're just going to move it up into the air. So we've got another 10 studs here, but since the player will already have completed the 10 studs, we're going to change this to 15 studs. So let's just take the scale tool, and then we can drag upwards. And as you can see, as we drag, you can see this Y number, this 11 here, is going to increase in size up to 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so we've now got our 15 studs. Don't worry about it still saying 1 stud over here. We can change those in a few moments. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep on doing this for 20 studs, 25 studs, 30 studs, all the way to 50 studs. So I'll just speed up this part of the video, but I'm just doing the exact same thing. Okay, so I've got all of my platforms created. All that's left to do now is to change the text on each of them, and I'm also going to give them some color. So I'm just going to change the color of each part to be a rainbow. So I'm going to select this 5 stud part down here, 10 studs, and I'm going to go to the brick color, and I'm going to change that to a nice orange. And we're going to do the same over here. The brick color can be yellow, this one can be green, this one can be light blue. There are all of our platforms, and what we can do is we can, if you want, you can now go and change the text on each one. So we'll go all the way to the bottom here, and we'll just select our platform. Then we'll click on its children by clicking on this arrow. We'll then do the same thing for the surface GUI, and we want to select the text label. So you can see there's a slight blue outline now across the face of this part, which means the text label is selected, and we can set this to 10 studs. And there you go, the text has changed. So I'll just now select the next platform. Right at the very top, we've got our 50 studs. Now obviously it's hard to see this text because it's on a white background, so we can change the text color 3 to 50 studs to something like a grey or a black. It's up to you. Okay, there we go. So we've now created our stud jumps obby. All that's left to do is to write some code which will gradually increase the player's jump power. So to do this, click on the server script service in the Explorer. This is where we will store all of our code. And click on the plus icon, and then just choose a script. You may have to search for it. Make sure you choose just a script, not a local script, not a module script, just a script. Now, let's just zoom in here, and I'm going to just hide this spanner. And what we want to write is an event for when a new player joins. So we can say game.players.playerAdded::connect, and then in a pair of brackets, we're going to write a function. We're then going to need another pair of brackets, and then we're going to drop a line right here. So you should have your function, a pair of brackets, an end, and then a closing pair of brackets afterwards. Okay, And make sure that you've got everything spelt correctly and everything capitalized as well, just like I have. So we've got a capital P here, another capital P, capital A. You've got to make sure it's totally correct, because if you had a lowercase, then it would break the script. Okay, so you've got to make sure that everything is capitalized correctly. Now, inside of these brackets is going to be an argument called player. And what this will do is when a new player joins the game, we will now have a reference to their player object. So we can now wait for their character to be added into the game. So we want to set their jump power, which is a way to control how high a player can jump through their humanoid. But to get their humanoid, we need to get their character. And since there can be a delay in between the player joining the game and their character spawning and being loaded, we have to use another event called character added. So we can say player.character added :connect, and then again in brackets we'll have a function, another pair of brackets, and we'll drop a line. So now any code inside of here will run when a character has spawned. Okay, so the first event would run when a player had joined the game, but the player's character may not have been loaded yet. So we had to use the player object to then use the character added event to wait for their character. And we can then pass the argument of the character, so we have a reference to it. So anything we do to this character will be done to the character of any player who joins the game. So we can then say character.humanoid. Now the humanoid, you can think of it as like a settings window where you can change things for a specific player, because loads of different Roblox games will have different needs for a player. Some games you might want the player to be able to jump higher than you can in other games. Some games the player may want to walk faster than you can in other games, right? So that's what the humanoid is. It's sort of like a settings panel for a character. So we can say character.humanoid.useJumpPower equals true. And this is acting as like an override. It's basically saying to Roblox, okay, we don't want the player to be able to jump at their default height. We want to provide a custom height for them to jump at, because we want them to be able to jump at 0 studs when they first join, and then maybe 10 minutes later we want them to have 100 studs of jump power. So in order to allow us to use that jump power, we have to say character.humanoid.useJumpPower equals true. And now that we've done that, we can set their jump power to 0, because when they first join the game, we want them to have 0 jump power so that they can't beat the obby straight away. So character.humanoid.jumpPower equals 0. And don't forget, really important to have that capitalization for the J, the P, the H. Wherever you see me using a capital letter, just make sure you do as well, because this is the syntax of the Roblox Luau language. So now we have set the character's jump power to be 0 when they join the game. Let's have a go at joining our game and seeing what happens. So make sure you've got the spawn point close to your first platform. If you don't have a spawn point, you can simply just click on the home tab. Underneath the test section, click on this little arrow and just select play here. And that will position your character wherever the camera is currently pointing. If we just press the space bar, you can see nothing is happening. Okay, you're going to have to trust that I'm actually pressing the space bar. Okay, I'm pressing it. My character isn't jumping though. That's because my jump power has been set to 0 by the script. And if you wanted to just double check this, you could see in the workspace, if you find your character, you find the humanoid, and you scroll down, you'll see that jump power is set to 0. So I can't jump any higher than this first platform. Now what we want is we want to increase this jump power by 1 every single second. So if my jump power was 1, we can change it dynamically from the properties menu. Just for testing here, you can see I'm starting to slightly jump. Maybe if I set it to 5, I can go a little bit higher. If I go to 10, you can see I can jump a little bit higher. Now let's change it to 50. Okay, now I can jump kind of high. Now jump power doesn't represent how many studs you can jump, more so just the power of the force which is lifting you upwards, which is acting against gravity. So the higher this value, the higher you're going to jump. You can see now I've set it to 100. We can go quite high, but eventually we're not going to be able to get past this one. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is increase this jump power every single second. and it's really easy. All we have to do is create a loop that runs every 1 second. We then will need to loop through all of the players currently in the game so that we can increment their jump power one by one. That's all we have to do. So firstly, this is a comment, by the way. These 3 lines are comments. They're just that we signify a comment with 2 hyphens, and it's just like a note to ourselves. The script just ignores it. So to create our loop, we are just going to say while task.wait, and then in brackets, we'll put 1, do. And this is going to create an endless loop where any code inside of here will run every 1 second, forever, whilst the server is running. When all of the players leave the game, the server will shut down and this will stop running. But whilst the server is active, any code inside of here will run every second. So we've created our loop. That's done. Now we want to loop through all of the players currently in the game. To do this, we use a for loop. And a for loop allows you to search through a list. So we want to get our players. Let's firstly write out our for loop by saying for underscore, comma, player in pairs, do, and a pair of brackets after the pairs, and then do, drop a line, and you've got this end here. So what this is going to do is if we provide this for loop with a list, in this case it's going to be the list of players in the game currently. So to do that we can say game.players : get players, and then a pair of brackets after that. That's going to return a list of all of the players currently in the game. So any player that's in the game gets parented to this players service, and by calling a function called getPlayers on the players service, it will automatically return us a table or a list of all players. And all this for loop is doing is just looping over that list. So whatever we do to this player here will be done to every single player in that list. So firstly, we want to get the character of each player, and we can say player.character. But this character may not exist yet, because I said earlier there's a delay between the player joining the game and their character spawning. So let's add an if statement to make sure the character does exist, so that in case it doesn't, we're not going to get any errors. So we can say if player.character, then drop a line, and then any code inside of here will only run if the character exists. So if the character does exist, we can say player.character.humanoid.jump power. We want to take the current value of their jump power, which could be 0, it could be 1, 2, 3, it could be any number, because each player will have a different jump power depending on when they joined. We can say plus equals 1. That will take the current value and it will add 1 onto it. We have to say plus equals because if we just said plus, the script would get confused. It's getting the current jump power, which could be 2, and it's adding 1 onto it, and then this would just become 3, and then the script just sees the number 3 and it gets confused. So we have to say plus equals, and that tells the script to increment this value by 1. So we've now created the code which will increase the player's jump power. So now we should be able to complete the obby. But what I want to do is I want to just do a final finishing touch by displaying the player's jump power in a GUI. A GUI is an element that goes on the screen. So to create one, head to the starter GUI, click on the plus icon and select Screen GUI. Now select the Screen GUI, click on the plus and insert a text label. You can see we've now got some text on our screen. So I'm going to select this text label, and in the properties window, I'm going to set background transparency to 1. That will remove our background. We can then scroll down and we can select text scaled and set that to be checked. I'm going to set the text color 3 to be white, and I'm going to select the font as being Fredoka 1, similar to the one that we selected for our platforms. Now I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to go to the position and I'm going to set this to 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0. This will put it in the middle of our screen, almost, but because the position is being taken from the top left corner and not the middle, it's not in the exact middle of our screen. So to fix that, we can go to the anchor point and set it to 0.5, 0. There we go. All that's left to do is go back to the position, and because I don't want it to be in the middle of the screen, I want it to be further down here. Let's change the third value, 0.5 to 0.8. There we go. Okay, so we've now created our label. All that's left to do is write some code which will change the text of this label when our jump power changes. So we can remove this text that says label because we don't want anything to display straight away. It's still here, it's just not got any text in it. And we can click on the plus. We can insert a local script into our text label. And now all we need to do is say local player. In fact, yeah, we'll say local player equals game.players.local player. And so this is our local player. So every player will have a local script running inside of them. And we want to get their character now. And the character may not be loaded yet. So what we can do is we can say repeat task.wait. And then we don't need to put a number in here. It will just use a default value of 0.3 until player.character. Okay, and that will just repeat endlessly until the player's character has loaded. And then we can say script.parent.text equals player.character.humanoid.jump power. And that will set the text of the label to the jump power. Now, let's just add some text before that, which says jump power with a colon like this. Then we can do a pair of dots to concatenate the number, the jump power, to our text here. And finally, let's just, before the jump power, let's write toString, and we'll put the jump power value in brackets. That's because whenever we're working with text, we have words and characters, which is a string data type, and we're combining it with a number. So we can just convert this number into a string before we concatenate it. Concatenating is when you take two strings and you put them together using the dots here. And that will set the label text to our jump power. Finally, we want to update this whenever the jump power changes because it's only going to set the text when the player first joins. So if their jump power changes, we'll need to reflect that in the GUI. So we can say player.character.humanoid:get property changed signal. So whenever a property of the humanoid changes, we're going to tell the script that we only want to listen for when the jump power changes. We can connect that to a function, and then inside of this function, we can paste the line from earlier, which will now update the label's text whenever the jump power changes. It's always a good practice to comment your code. So let's just exit out of our two scripts and let's click on play here. Okay, here we are, and you can see the jump power is slowly increasing by 1 every second. You can see we're starting to get off the ground when we press the space bar. And I'm just going to speed up this part of the video until we can get over the next block. Okay, our jump power is now 50, and there we go. We got over the orange block, and now we're working our way towards the 15 studs yellow block. And you can see the jump power is being reflected here in our GUI because every single time the property of the humanoid called the jump power changes, that's going to update in our text label on our GUI, thanks to our get property change signal event, which is constantly checking out and waiting for that to change. And now my jump power, as it gets closer to 100, you can see I'm jumping higher and higher. I should be able to get over this one, but it's going to be a while before I get to the very top of the stud jumps obby here. So there you go, you've just created your own stud jumps obby in Roblox, but how do you publish your game? Firstly, go to the File tab and then select Publish to Roblox As. Now this is going to open a pop-up where you can either choose to overwrite a current game that you may have, or you can create a new game, which we're going to do. So select Create New Game in the bottom left. Now give your game a name. I'm going to call it Stud Jumps Obby. You can give it a description if you'd like. Set the creator to be yourself or one of your groups. Select a genre if you'd like, and I'm going to disable Team Create because we don't need it. That's only if you're working with other players. So I'm going to click on Create. This is going to create our game and publish it onto Roblox. And finally, just click on Game Settings, go to Permissions, and then either select Friends or Public, depending on whether you want just your friends to be able to play your game or anybody on Roblox. I'm going to select Public, and click on save. Now you should be able to go to the top right, click on this little link icon, which is share, and then you can copy the link to your game. Now open up your web browser, head to the game, and you'll be able to play it. Now, just a heads up, any games that have been published on Roblox won't be visible in the recently played section for 7 days, I believe. This is just a way to get around any spam or scam games from appearing there. But after that period, it should start to show up in your recently played. However, you can still share it with your friends. You can change your own thumbnail if you'd like by going to the 3 dots and selecting configure this place. It's completely up to you. You can also find your place by going in the Create tab up here, and then under Creations Experience, you'll see your game here. If you click it, you can go View on Roblox, and that will take you back here. If you ever want to make changes to your game, then to publish an update, all you'll have to do is go to File, and just click on Publish to Roblox. So to jump into your game, just click on the green play button, and you'll be good to go. And here we are, we're in a Roblox server playing my Stud Jumps obby. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe for more. And if you'd like to take the source code from this project, you can become a member of my channel by clicking on the join button and selecting premium membership. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.